In the dim pre-dawn hush of a Seattle morning, a single light burns inside a tiny coffee shop, a beacon of warmth against the rain. This is no ordinary morning, and this is no ordinary coffee shop. Because what brews here is a revolution in a cup, a humble beginning to a story that will ignite the world. How did one little cafe come to conquer the globe? The answer lies in the journey of a man driven by an impossible dream, a man who turned every setback into steam that powered an empire. Listen closely, because hidden in the aroma of freshly ground beans and the quiet scrape of a chair is a tale of struggle and triumph, of one soul's unyielding determination to change not just his own fate, but the lives of millions. It all starts with a boy, born far from here, who dared to dream beyond the gray walls that caged him. Brooklyn, New York, years before that Seattle dawn. A young boy named Howard stares through the cracked window of a cramped apartment in the projects, watching his father limp home in the snow. It's 1960 and Howard is only 7, but the memory etches itself like a scar, his father's face twisted in pain, his work uniform soaked and his arm in a sling after a terrible accident on the ice. There's no insurance, no compensation, just a hard-working man suddenly broken, with nothing to catch him. Inside, Howard's mother is pregnant and terrified, and the family has no savings to keep them afloat. Little Howard watches as his proud father, Fred, collapses onto the threadbare couch, eyes filled with humiliation and despair. In that moment, Howard feels his childhood shatter. Fear and worry churn in his tiny chest as he realizes that life can be brutally unfair. He doesn't fully grasp the words, no health insurance, no job, no money, but he understands the anguish on his parents' faces. He even remembers nights when bill collectors would call and his parents, desperate and ashamed, would hand the phone to him, whispering for him to tell the stranger that they weren't home. Imagine that, a 7-year-old boy lying to bill collectors to buy a few more days for his family. The weight of it presses on him, and tears sting his eyes as he hears his mother softly sobbing in the other room when she thinks no one can hear. A weight settles on Howard's small shoulders, a sense of helplessness but also a spark of resolve. Even as a child, he silently promises himself that one day he will build something better, something that could make sure people like his father aren't tossed aside and forgotten. In that cramped apartment thick with worry, a seed is planted deep in Howard's heart, a seed of purpose, born from pain, that will one day need only the right moment to burst into life. He doesn't fully understand it yet, but years later Howard will look back on that winter evening as the defining moment that quietly set the course of his life. Years tumble forward. Howard grows up amid concrete, crowding, and hardship, but that spark inside him only glows brighter. He is an outsider in his own neighborhood, a dreamer among those resigned to what life hands them. To escape the fate that trapped his father, Howard throws himself into sports and school, running faster and pushing harder as if outrunning the poverty nipping at his heels. His talent on the football field earns him a scholarship and a ticket out of the projects. When he leaves Brooklyn for college, his mother hugs him tightly at the bus station, eyes wet with pride and worry, whispering, "Don't forget where you came from, Howard. And don't you ever give up." He carries those words, along with the hopes of his family, as he travels into a world they've never seen. At Northern Michigan University, far from home, he scrubs dishes and takes odd jobs to get by, feeling at times like a stranger in a strange land, surrounded by classmates who never had to choose between buying books or buying groceries. At times, he goes to bed hungry after skipping meals to stretch every dollar, his stomach aches, but he tells himself that every sacrifice is a down payment on the future he's fighting for. Every late night washing plates or even selling his own blood to pay the bills only hardens his resolve. He won't quit. He can't. With each small victory, a passed exam, a won game, he imagines his parents' faces and sees the impact of his struggle turn into hope. For years later, Howard becomes the first in his family to wear a college graduation gown. As he holds his diploma, he remembers standing by that tattered couch as a boy, and he feels the distance he's traveled in his bones. The journey is far from over, but on that day, beneath a sky that suddenly seems full of possibility, Howard knows he has taken a first critical step toward breaking the cycle that tried to hold him back. And yet, as he steps into the adult world, he will soon learn that the road beyond the projects is not lined with gold, but with new challenges that will test how deeply he truly wants that better life. Freshly out of college in the late 1970s, Howard finds himself in a maze of skyscrapers and suits, working as a salesperson at Xerox. Every morning he squeezes into a crowded Manhattan elevator, rising to a 37th floor office where he wears a cheap suit and a forced smile. It's a decent job by any standard, steady paycheck, shiny shoes, a desk with a view of another gray building. For a kid from the projects, this corporate world seems like the promised land he'd dreamed of. But under the buzz of fluorescent lights and the drone of office small talk, Howard's soul itches. Day after day in that gray cubicle, pushing copiers and quotas, he feels something vital is missing. This can't be it, he thinks. This can't be all there is. His heart longs for a sense of purpose, a connection to that old promise burning quietly inside him. So when a smaller European housewares company offers him a role, he jumps at it, trading the corporate giant for a chance to prove himself on a new stage. The company, Hammerplast, tasks him with selling coffee grinders and filters. It's not glamorous, but Howard pours himself into it, becoming director of sales by age 26. And that's when fate tips its hand. One afternoon, buried in sales reports, Howard notices something odd. A little coffee shop in Seattle is buying an unusually large number of his company's drip coffee makers. Starbucks. He wonders, intrigued by this client on the distant West Coast he's never heard of. Seattle calls to him like a whisper. In 1981, on a business trip, he steps off a plane into the drizzling Pacific Northwest and walks into a modest storefront at Pike Place Market, a store with a strange mermaid logo and the rich scent of coffee roasting in the air. The moment Howard pushes open the door, the world changes. Inside, it's small and unassuming, more a shop for beans and coffee equipment than a bustling cafe, but there's something almost magical swirling in that air. The aroma is intoxicating, dark, nutty, and foreign, a far cry from the watered-down diner coffee he knew. He watches customers chat passionately with the staff about exotic beans from Sumatra and Yemen. He sees shelves of gleaming coffee grinders and sacks of green coffee waiting to be roasted. It's as if he's stepped into a temple devoted to coffee, and every sense is lit up. Howard's heart pounds with a thrilling certainty. In that tiny shop, amidst burlap sacks of beans and the hiss of an antique roaster, he feels a spark catch fire. Quality coffee, an experience built around it, could this be the purpose he's been seeking? He imagines his father's weary face, and a crazy thought flits through his mind, maybe this is a way to build that, something better, he promised long ago. He strikes up a conversation with the store's founders, Jerry Baldwin, Gordon Bowker, and Zev Siegel, passionate visionaries who talk about coffee in terms of art and philosophy. Howard listens intently, like a student soaking up wisdom, marveling that coffee could inspire such devotion. By the time he leaves that little shop, the rain has stopped and the evening sky is streaked with purple and gold. Standing outside on the cobblestone street clutching a bag of fresh roasted Sumatra, Howard knows he has glimpsed a new path. He knows he has to be a part of this. A vision begins to crystallize in his mind, a vision of Starbucks as not just a store selling coffee beans, but a place where community and coffee intertwine, where a cup of coffee can spark connection and bring a moment of joy to the day. It's wild, and he can hardly articulate it yet, but it grips his soul. In that instant, the restless young salesman from Brooklyn finds a calling in a cup of coffee. That vision gnaws at Howard, pulling him back to Seattle again and again. He courts Starbucks with the fervor of a man in love, persistently persuading the hesitant founders that he can help them grow. It takes a year of convincing and a heart full of passion, but by 1982 they finally give him a chance. Howard quits his steady job in New York, packs his life into boxes, and moves across the country to join Starbucks as director of retail operations and marketing. Friends call him crazy, leaving a stable career for a scrappy coffee outfit with only a few stores. But Howard doesn't care. He feels destiny calling, and for the first time since that childhood promise, he feels alive with purpose. In Seattle, he throws himself into the work. He's like a kid in a candy store learning the craft of coffee from the inside out, tasting blends, roasting beans, listening to every customer. The energy is electric, and Howard begins to whisper his bigger dreams to anyone who'll listen. Starbucks could be huge, it could be everywhere, it could change how Americans experience coffee. Some smile and nod, others look at him like he's dreaming too big. And maybe he is, until fate intervenes one more time. In 1983, Starbucks sends Howard to Milan for an international housewares show. The trip will last just a week, but what he finds there will ignite the next explosion of his vision. On his first morning in Milan, Howard wanders from his hotel onto cobbled streets alive with buzzing Vespers and early risers standing at espresso bars. He steps into a cafe on a corner and is immediately enveloped by an ambience unlike anything he's felt. It's standing room only, the place hums with life, people laughing, businessmen in crisp suits sipping their morning espresso, baristas calling out orders with friendly banter. The air is thick with the rich scent of espresso and a sense of community. Cup after tiny cup, Howard tastes the velvety espresso, feeling it awaken something in his soul. He spends days exploring these Italian cafes, watching as locals treat coffee not as a mere transaction, but as a cherished daily ritual. At one small cafe, an elderly barista notices Howard's awe and beckons him behind the counter. With a proud grin, the barista shows him how to pull the perfect espresso shot by hand, steam billowing as he explains in melodic Italian that coffee is not just a drink, but a moment of joy. He teaches Howard to say, "Che bella giornata." What a beautiful day, and laughs as Howard repeats the phrase in his rough accent. The message is clear: a good coffee, shared with others, can make a day beautiful. In that moment, Howard feels not like a stranger, but a welcomed guest in this world of tiny cups and big hearts. Howard has what he later describes as an epiphany: Starbucks had completely missed the point. The coffee itself is only part of the magic, the real secret is the experience, the connection, the theater of it all. One evening in Milan, as golden light spills through the cafe windows and a tenor of opera drifts from a radio, Howard finds himself shaking with excitement. Here it is, the blueprint for what Starbucks could become. His mind races: bring this to America, create not just a store, but a community center. Third place, between work and home where people can slow down and savor life over a cup. He imagines cafes on every corner where a lonely kid from Brooklyn or a tired worker or anyone at all can walk in and feel special, feel uplifted, if only for the time it takes to drink a latte. It's such a simple idea, but so powerful. On the flight back to Seattle, Howard can hardly keep his seat. He scribbles in his notebook furiously, outlining plans, sketching ideas for an Italian-style espresso bar under the Starbucks name. He feels as though he's carrying a precious flame back home, desperate to kindle it into a fire that could light up an entire industry. Back in Seattle, Howard bursts into the Starbucks offices brimming with enthusiasm. He gathers the owners and his colleagues, painting a vivid picture of what he saw in Italy: customers treated like family, baristas with flair, the air alive with camaraderie and the aroma of espresso. He speaks of bringing lattes and cappuccinos to Seattle, of recreating that Italian magic in their stores. His excitement is contagious to some of the younger staff, but the original founders sit in silence, their expressions cautious and closed. When Howard finishes, the room is thick with tension. Finally, one of the founders, Jerry Baldwin, clears his throat and says, "Howard, that's not what we do. Starbucks is a coffee retailer, not a restaurant. We're in the business of selling beans, not entertaining customers." Howard's heart sinks. He tries to argue, show them the numbers, the potential profits, the way people reacted when he made them espresso back at the shop, but the decision has been made. They won't budge. Starbucks will not become the kind of cafe Howard envisions. The meeting ends, and people file out, leaving Howard alone in a conference room littered with his hopeful sketches and notes, feeling the sting of defeat. Outside, the Seattle drizzle runs in rivulets down the windowpane as he sits there, head in hands. He gave up everything to be here. He showed them a future gleaming with possibility, and they shut it down without a second glance. In that moment, he feels utterly lost. Doubt creeps in. Was he foolish to dream so big? Is he just a naive kid from the projects trying to play corporate visionary? Days pass and Howard can't shake the feeling of a door closing on his dream. He paces his small apartment late at night, heart aching, envisioning the Italian espresso bars like ghosts taunting him with what could have been. Each day at work, scooping coffee beans and selling home grinders, he feels like he's suffocating under the weight of unrealized potential. The spark within him that flared so brightly in Milan now flickers in the gloom of reality. But deep down, beneath the disappointment and embarrassment, something stronger refuses to die out. In these dark days, Howard finds solace in a weekly ritual, playing pickup basketball with a group of friends. One evening after a scrappy game at a local gym, as they sit on the hardwood catching their breath, Howard confides in his friend Scott, his lawyer buddy who's watched his Starbucks saga from the sidelines. With a towel around his neck, Howard voices his frustration and his impossible vision one more time, as if trying to expel it or confirm it's real. Scott listens, then fixes Howard with a steady gaze. "If you believe in this so much," he says quietly, "then do it yourself. Start your own coffee place. Do it your way." The words hang in the air like a challenge and an invitation. Howard drives home that night with his mind racing and Scott's words echoing in his ears. By the time he reaches his doorstep, he knows what he has to do. It's risky, it's crazy, and it might ruin him. But staying chained to a safe path that betrays his dream, that would be a slow death of the soul. So one day, heart pounding, Howard steps into the founder's office and announces that he's leaving. He thanks them for the opportunity and respectfully explains that he cannot let go of what he saw in Italy. He has to pursue it, even if it means starting from scratch and walking away from a steady paycheck. It's the scariest decision of his life, a leap off a cliff with no net, but in that fear, he feels a strange freedom. Late that night at home, his wife holds his hand. She's frightened too, but she believes in him. They agree to tighten their belts, mortgage what they must, and dive headlong into the unknown. At 33 years old, Howard Schultz walks away from security and into a storm of uncertainty, determined to will his vision into existence or go down fighting. The new venture needs a name, a plan, and money, lots of money that Howard doesn't have. He decides to call his dream, Illinois Journal, named after an Italian newspaper, to honor the country that inspired him and to signal that this will be a daily ritual for customers, as essential as their morning news. But inspiration alone can't pay for espresso machines, rent, or staff. Howard finds himself in a new battlefield, the offices of investors and banks, where one man with a dream must convince others to believe. Armed with nothing but passion and a well-worn business plan, he starts knocking on doors. What he faces is a gauntlet of raised eyebrows and polite refusals. One by one, wealthy investors and venture capitalists shake their heads. Gourmet coffee. Americans will never go for it on every corner, they say. You want to create a European coffee house culture here? It's a fad, too risky. Day after day, Howard leaves meetings with his briefcase heavy but his heart heavier. Each rejection feels like a blow, and soon the blows number in the hundreds. He comes home to his tiny apartment late, loosening his tie with trembling fingers, thinking of his wife and the family they want to start, and he wonders how much longer he can hold on. One night, after yet another investor told him no, with a forced smile of pity, Howard stands in the semi-darkness of his kitchen, staring at the silent telephone. Doubt wraps around him like a cold fog. What if they are right? What if he's chasing a fantasy and dragging his loved ones toward ruin? What if he swallowed his pride, went back to the Starbucks owners and begged for his old job back? Would that be so terrible? The thought slithers in and makes him shiver with shame. He grips the edge of the counter until his knuckles go white, his mind a storm of fear and second-guessing. He closes his eyes and in the darkness he sees that 7-year-old boy again, hears his mother's voice telling him not to give up. He sees his father's defeated eyes. A tear slips down Howard's cheek as frustration and heartache overwhelm him. But as he stands there, he remembers something else too. In Milan, amidst the clatter and warmth of those cafes, he felt alive and certain for the first time. That feeling wasn't a lie. It was real, and it's worth fighting for. He breathes deeply, wipes his eyes, and straightens his back. If he gives up now, every hardship, every sacrifice would have been for nothing. The very thought of surrender steels him for another day. Slowly, against the odds, a few people do believe. A local doctor moved by his passion writes a modest check. A married couple who run a small business decide to take a chance on him. Even his old bosses at Starbucks, despite their differences with him, chip in $150,000 as investors in Illinois Journal, a gesture of goodwill that feels like a symbolic passing of the torch. Piece by piece, dollar by dollar, Howard scrapes together enough to open his first store. It's far from the grand cafe of his dreams, just 700 square feet tucked in the corner of a downtown Seattle office building, but it is his. On a rainy April morning in 1986, Howard stands in front of the glass doors of the very first Illinois Journal coffee bar. His heart is thundering. Inside, the counters gleam and the chrome espresso machine imported from Italy stands ready. He spent countless late nights on his hands and knees laying tiles, painting walls, assembling furniture, doing whatever it took to turn an empty retail space into the living embodiment of his vision. His small team, just a handful of baristas he trained personally, looked to him with nervous excitement, trusting his leadership. Howard takes a breath, unlocks the doors, and the first curious customers trickle in. The espresso machine hisses to life, shooting steam into the air, operatic music plays softly in the background, and homage to the Italian roots, the rich, nutty scent of espresso instantly blankets the room. One by one, seat-late lights on their way to work pause, intrigued by this new cafe where they can actually stand and sip a crafted cup of coffee made just for them. A few recognize Howard from his Starbucks days and give him warm, knowing nods, others are just curious what an Illinois Journal could be. By mid-morning, the little shop is buzzing. A line forms out the door, and for the first time, Howard sees strangers embracing the dream he carried back from Italy. A young woman closes her eyes to savor her first sip of a creamy cafe latte and smiles as if transported. Two buttoned-up businessmen pause their rush and actually chat at a standing bar over tiny espresso shots. A tired security guard from the building warms his hands on a hot cappuccino and laughs at a barista's friendly joke. It's happening, exactly what Howard envisioned. Amid the bustle, Howard steps aside for a moment, leaning against the wall to take it all in. The sight blurs as tears of relief and joy well up. He did it, just one small store, but it's alive and real and it works. All the no's he endured, all the fear and doubt, they were worth this single moment. In the back of his mind, a voice whispers, it's still just the beginning. Illinois Journal quickly becomes a local hit. Within months, the morning rush brings lines out the door. Howard often rolls up his sleeves to steam milk and pull shots alongside his baristas, greeting customers by name, always observing, always learning. Encouraged by the response, he opens a second location later that year, and then a third. Each new cafe carries the same heartbeat, opera in the air, smiling baristas, a feeling that here, for a few minutes, life slows down. Yet, success brings new trials. Running multiple stores stretches Howard thin. He's constantly worrying about quality control, about training new hires in this delicate dance of service and coffee artistry. There are days the stress is suffocating, equipment breaks down, supply deliveries run late, costs balloon unexpectedly. Money is still tight, and Howard finds himself fretting over every penny, sometimes skipping his own salary to ensure his employees, whom he calls partners, are paid on time. He has also started a practice unheard of in the industry, giving even part-time baristas access to health insurance and stock options. It's expensive, and some advisors warn him it'll hurt the bottom line. But Howard thinks of Fred, his father, and that dark winter when an injury left his family desperate. He's determined that under his watch, no one who pours coffee for him will struggle like his father did. This commitment, born out of childhood pain, becomes a cornerstone of his company. And while it adds strain to the young business's finances, it also builds fierce loyalty. People sense that Illinois Journal isn't just another job, it's a family that has their back. As 1987 dawns, Howard finally feels momentum at his back. Illinois Journal is thriving, and he starts to entertain a daring thought, expanding beyond Seattle, maybe taking this concept national. But before he can act on it, fate intervenes with a twist of poetic symmetry. News comes that the original owners of Starbucks, his old mentors, have decided to sell the company. Starbucks has remained a modest local chain with 6 stores and a roasting facility, and the founders now want to pursue other projects. The name, the stores, the roasting operation, all of it could be sold to someone else and slip away forever, or it could be Howard's to reclaim and reinvent, if he can find a way to seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It feels as if the universe has opened a door just for him, offering the very treasure he fell in love with 6 years ago. But the price tag is staggering, about $4 million, far more money than Illinois Journal has ever seen. Howard's mind reels, it's the dream dangling in front of him, and it could vanish in a blink if he fails to raise the funds. With renewed determination electrifying his veins, he goes back to the investor trail, pitching this grander vision to anyone who will listen. This time, he's not just selling a concept, he has thriving stores and the Starbucks brand itself as leverage. Some of those who once dismissed him now see the gleam of a real opportunity and come to the table. Money begins to trickle in, old supporters invest more, new believers join, and bit by bit he inches closer to the target. Still, as the deadline to buy Starbucks approaches, he's short. And that's when a competitor strikes from the shadows. A local investor with deep pockets and an eye for a great deal decides he wants Starbucks for himself. One afternoon, Howard walks into what he thinks is a routine meeting with some potential backers, only to find the atmosphere tense and odd. The rival investor is there, leaning back in a chair with a cool smirk. He has been quietly lobbying Starbucks owners and other investors, trying to edge Howard out. Howard's heart pounds as the man begins to speak in a patronizing tone. "This is business, kid," the rival says, tapping ash from a cigar into a tray. "Nothing personal. Go build another coffee bar or whatever it is you do. Starbucks needs real money behind it." The words slice through Howard. For a moment, he cannot breathe. The room spins as the rival collects his papers and strolls out, leaving Howard with his dream teetering on the brink. That evening, Howard steps out into the cool Seattle air and feels an avalanche of despair crash over him. He finds a quiet corner and breaks down, shoulders shaking as sobs he's held in for years finally escape. All the struggle, the sleepless nights, the prayers and promises, are they about to be rendered meaningless by one man's maneuver? He has never felt so defeated, not even on that day in the conference room when his Italy idea was rejected. This is the lowest low. But even in this darkness, Howard's story isn't ready to end. Wiping his eyes, he makes a decision: if this dream is going to die, he will go down swinging to the very last second. He reaches out to those he trusts most. His friend Scott, the same lawyer who encouraged him to take this leap, rallies by his side, and together they seek counsel from a man whose very name carries weight in Seattle, Bill Gates Sr., respected attorney and the father of Microsoft's founder. Gates Sr. and a few other influential allies step in like guardian angels. Behind closed doors, they strategize and intervene. Phone calls are made, meetings arranged. Gates Sr. personally meets with the rival investor and the Starbucks sellers, urging fair play and cooperation. Under mounting pressure and perhaps a twinge of conscience, the rival backs off, withdrawing his bid. The path is clear again, but Howard is left with only days to secure the remaining funds. In a final, frantic push, he doubles back to every investor who ever showed interest, recounts the entire journey, Italy, Illinois Journal, the vision of Starbucks reborn, laying his soul bare in one last appeal. And miraculously, people step up. Some are small investors he never expected would stretch further, others are new faces inspired by his fervor. By late summer 1987, Howard stands in a lawyer's office with pen in hand and tears in his eyes as he signs the papers to purchase Starbucks. At 34 years old, he becomes the owner of the very company that gave him his start. As the ink dries, Howard closes his eyes for a moment. In his mind he sees that little boy in Brooklyn, sees his father's face and his mother's unwavering faith. A quiet sob of joy catches in his throat, but he composes himself as his friend Scott claps him on the back. He did it. He actually did it. That evening, after the deal is done, Howard slips into one of the Starbucks stores, now his stores, after closing time. He stands in the quiet dark, inhaling the familiar scent of roasted beans, and feels tears of gratitude well up again. On a small table in the corner, he places a worn photograph of his father Fred, silently telling him, "We did it." There's no champagne toast, no cheering crowd, just a son paying tribute to his father's memory in the stillness of a place that, by morning, will buzz with life. The celebration is brief, because now the real work begins. Howard has to transform Starbucks from a beloved local business into the global vision he's nurtured. With a team of loyal believers from Illinois Journal and the remaining Starbucks staff, he rolls up his sleeves and gets to work, merging the two companies into one. He even swallows a bit of personal pride by letting go of the Illinois Journal name and identity, his first creation, to embrace Starbucks as the banner under which they'll march forward. Starbucks has an allure and mystique, he knows, that can open more doors, so he puts sentiment aside for the greater dream. Under his leadership, the Starbucks brand swiftly begins to stretch beyond Seattle. As Starbucks ventured into new cities across America, Howard was there every step of the way. When the first store in Chicago opened on a frigid winter morning, he flew out to witness it firsthand. He stood by the door shaking hands with curious Chicagoans, anxious and hopeful to see if a city famous for its love of sports and beer would embrace a cup of Seattle coffee. Despite the biting wind and sleet, a line formed down the block. By midday, the shop had sold out of pastries and brewed more coffee than anyone imagined. Seeing those Midwestern faces light up over lattes and mochas, Howard felt a swell of pride, confirmation that his vision could indeed take root beyond the Pacific Northwest. By 1992, Starbucks has exploded to over 150 stores and, defying all skeptics, the company goes public on the stock market. That night, after the IPO celebration, Howard steps away from the noise and calls his wife. His voice cracks as he whispers, "We did it," thanking her for believing in him through every moment of doubt. On the other end of the line in Seattle, she wipes away tears of joy, both of them vividly recalling the nights when they weren't sure this day would ever come. Howard stands on the trading floor of the NASDAQ in New York City as Starbucks shares are listed, a moment that feels surreal. The boy from Brooklyn, who once had to hide from bill collectors and work odd jobs to survive, is now the visionary CEO of a company valued in the hundreds of millions. For those who took a chance on him early on, the local doctor, the couple who invested, even his former bosses, the IPO turns their modest investments into small fortunes. Belief and loyalty are paying off for many, and Howard couldn't be prouder that success is being shared. Still, he never forgets what truly got him here. He flies home to Seattle often, popping into stores unannounced, talking to baristas and customers, guarding the soul of the business fiercely. Starbucks under Howard becomes not just a chain of coffee shops, but a movement. The stores offer not only coffee but a sense of community in a fast-moving world. Third place, between work and home, where anyone can feel welcome for a moment of peace. The mission statement talks about nurturing the human spirit, and it's not just corporate jargon. Howard makes sure it's lived and breathed in each store. His employees, his partners, feel it, and customers do too. As the years pass, Starbucks crosses borders no one ever imagined a Seattle coffee shop could. In 1996, when Starbucks opens its first international store in Tokyo, Howard is there in the bustling Ginza district, watching with a mixture of pride and astonishment as a line of curious Japanese customers snakes out the door. The cultural barriers melt away as soon as the aroma of coffee and the friendly chorus of "Irashimasu. Welcome, greet the patrons." Howard sees that the need for connection and a little comfort in a cup is universal. From Japan to England, from South America to China, the green siren logo becomes a beacon. By the 2000s, tens of millions of people start their day or find an afternoon respite at Starbucks, and Howard becomes known worldwide as the man who changed how the world drinks coffee. Yet even at this peak, life tests Howard and Starbucks anew. In the mid-2000s, riding high on success, Starbucks expands rapidly, too rapidly. Stores pop up on every other corner, automated espresso machines replace the manual ones for speed, the original warmth of the Starbucks experience begins to fade under the glare of mass expansion. Howard, who had stepped down as CEO in 2000 to let a new generation lead, senses that something precious is slipping away. By 2007, storm clouds gather, sales decline, the economy inches toward recession, and Starbucks, once untouchable, appears overstretched and diluted. It's a familiar feeling, the specter of failure creeping in at the height of triumph, and it awakens the fighter in Howard once more. In January 2008, answering what he feels is a personal call of duty, Howard returns as CEO to rescue the sinking ship. Immediately, he makes bold, even controversial moves. He shuts down every single U.S. Starbucks for a day, every store, all 7,000 of them at the time, so he can retrain 135,000 baristas on how to make espresso with love and attention to detail, rekindling the art and passion that automated processes had diminished. Critics call it a costly stunt, but Howard knows it's a turning point, a statement that they will sacrifice short-term sales to restore long-term soul. He even summons all his store managers, over 10,000 people, to an unprecedented conference in New Orleans, where they spend days not just talking about coffee techniques and business strategies, but rolling up their sleeves to volunteer together rebuilding homes damaged by Hurricane Katrina. It's not just a training seminar, it's a revival of purpose. Side by side, they hammer nails and paint walls in the sweltering Louisiana heat during the day, then gather at night in a massive convention hall where Howard speaks from the heart. Standing under bright lights, looking out at a sea of partners from every corner of the country, he reminds them of who they are, not just sellers of coffee, but builders of community, merchants of kindness in a world that needs it. He thanks them for believing in the mission and implores them to uphold it in every cup they pour. His voice cracks as he speaks, and he's not alone. Thousands of others wipe away tears and rise to their feet, re-energized by a shared calling. This reignition of soul and solidarity lights a fire throughout the company. Slowly, Starbucks reclaims its magic. The baristas, re-inspired, start handcrafting drinks with pride again, happy to show off their latte art and share a conversation. The smell of fresh coffee comes rushing back as stores grind beans in-house once more. Customers notice the change, the warmth and human connection that first drew them in has returned. By the early 2010s, Starbucks not only pulls out of its nosedive, it soars to new heights, financially robust and culturally relevant, yet grounded in the values that built it. When Howard steps down again in 2017, he leaves a company that now spans over 25,000 stores in 75 countries, a company that proved a business can scale massively without losing its heart if its leader is willing to fight for it every single day. His legacy is etched not just in dollars earned or stores opened, but in the millions of lives touched, whether it's an employee who could afford to go back to school because of Starbucks stock grants, or a customer who found comfort during a rough time within the welcoming walls of a coffee shop. Now, decades after that single coffee shop opened in Seattle, it's clear that Starbucks did more than conquer the world with coffee, it fulfilled a promise born in the heart of a little boy in Brooklyn. In pursuing his dream, Howard Schultz also kept his vow to his father and fulfilled his mother's hopes. He built the kind of company his father never got to work for, one that treats its people with dignity and its customers like family. Howard's journey from a frigid Brooklyn tenement to the helm of a global empire stands as a testament to the power of dreaming boldly and caring deeply. It's proof that success isn't a straight line, but a winding path through despair and hope, through gut-wrenching failures and hard-won victories. His story feels like a movie because in many ways it is, a real-life epic of a man who refused to let go of a vision, even when others could not see it. It reminds us that behind every triumph that looks inevitable in hindsight, there is a person who fought through doubt and darkness to make it so. Think of how that dream lives on today. In countless Starbucks around the world, a bleary-eyed student greets dawn with a latte in hand, finding the energy to pursue her own dreams after a kind barista gives an encouraging word. A weary nurse finishing a night shift finds solace in a warm cappuccino and a quiet corner, recovering strength for the day ahead. A retired couple shuffles into their neighborhood Starbucks each morning, where the staff knows their names and their orders by heart. Over cups of coffee, they sit side by side and reminisce about the years gone by, their laughter filling the shop with warmth. In a bustling foreign city, far from Seattle, a homesick traveler steps into a Starbucks and feels a little less alone when the familiar smell of coffee and a friendly greeting in a green apron meet him at the door. None of these people may know Howard's name, but every one of them is touched by the ripple of his once audacious dream. The simple act of caring about coffee and people at the same time has created a tapestry of human connection across cultures and continents, all woven together by one man's vision. In the end, the lesson of Starbucks isn't about coffee at all, it's about the fire that lives in each of us, the passion to pursue a vision that others might call impossible, and the compassion to bring others along on the journey. As Howard himself once said, dream more than others think practical. Expect more than others think possible. Care more than others think wise. In those words lies the secret, the courage to believe when common sense says to quit, the will to push forward when the world shakes its head, and the heart to remember the human element in every endeavor. That is how one coffee shop conquered the world, one cup, one customer, one heartbeat at a time, through the indomitable spirit of a dreamer who proved that the darkest nights can produce the brightest stars. And that shining example challenges us all to look at our own dreams, no matter how small or large, and ask, are we willing to fight for them as he did? Because if we are, then we too might one day change the world. Starbucks itself stands as living proof that even the humblest of beginnings can blossom into something truly extraordinary beyond all expectations when fueled by relentless passion and an unwavering belief in a dream and in oneself.